Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Amanda Augustine and I am the career advice expert for Top Resume, Top Interview, as well as Top CV. As you can see, I am actually working from home, as I'm sure many of us are out there. I am here because I want to talk about what's going on, and more importantly, what are some of the things you can be doing if you are currently looking for a job, either because COVID has affected your family and you've been laid off or put on furlough, or maybe you were looking for a job before all this craziness happened and now you're like, okay, now what do I do? Since obviously things have changed quite a bit. Let me tell you, I know I said this in my last video, but I hear you. It is a stressful time. It is a strange time, but I would love to chat for, I don't know, we'll see how long we chat today. But really to answer any questions you have about what in the world can you do if you're currently looking for work, whether it's because you have been laid off due to the circumstances in the economy right now, or maybe you were already unemployed going into this. One thing I'll say on a lighter note is thanks so much for joining me for this, because you gave me a reason to put on something other than pajamas to work today. And I'm actually wearing jeans. I'm not even wearing pajama bottoms. I put on a full-on outfit. I even put makeup on. It's a big day here at the Augustine household. So thank you so much for joining me so that I could actually have a reason to really get dressed up and chat with all of you today. It is a crazy, crazy world out there, whether you suddenly have your children home. I have one, I have a preschooler, he's 4, with special needs. And I have to say, those of you with tons of children at home right now, God bless you, because one's enough for me right now. If this crazy time has affected your employment status, that's really what I'm here to talk about, is what can we do about that? How can I help you? Because obviously I'd love to help, but also we're all keeping our social distance and staying indoors or at home as much as possible. So let's talk about if you have recently been laid off, or perhaps it happened right before everything came down with the coronavirus. I think the first step is I want everybody to realize it's okay to take a couple days and take a breath. I know we're immediately like, go, 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 you have to find something. You know what? You need a day. You need a couple days, and you need to take a deep breath, and that's okay. In fact, it's probably the best thing you can do, because this is a very strange and very stressful time. It's very unprecedented. There's no book out there that tells you everything you need to do or know about what's going on. So remember, your mental health is important. And so you do need to find ways to take care of yourself as you're navigating these crazy waters. Hi, Danielle. Hi, Mira. Thanks for joining me. If anybody wants to put in the comments where you're tuning in from, or if you have any questions off the bat that you'd like me to answer, please feel free to put them in the comments now. Again, my name is Amanda Augustine, and I'm coming to you live from my home on Long Island, where I'm here to help provide some job search tips for thinking short-term as well as long-term. If your job was affected, as many people's jobs have been affected by the coronavirus, or a result of something that kind of trickled down from that. Really, all I've said right now is that you need to take a day or two, and that's okay. But after you do that, you do need to make a plan, right? Just to prepare for this, guys, and I will fully admit that I don't do a lot of Facebook Live. So this is new for me. I'm used to doing something recorded. And so I have a cheat sheet right here where I wrote down all my notes, just to let you know, because I am a planner. And hopefully I'll be able to read all of my handwriting as I'm going through this. A lot of people that I've been talking to, and I have friends who have certainly been affected. I have friends that were searching for a job before this all began, and they called me and said, "Well, now what do I do? Everything seems to be frozen." And the one thing I will say is that companies are still hiring. I know that's hard to believe. I know it seems that's not the case, but companies are hiring. You're just going to have to be strategic and look for where there is a need at the moment, and really figure out, are you looking for the short-term fix to get you through this TBD amount of time, or are you still looking for more of that long-term opportunity? And some of that is going to come from looking on job boards, looking through different resources. I have a whole list that I plan to share with you to determine, well, it is my industry and the type of role that I'm currently pursuing. Is that something that people are still hiring for right now? And if it is, okay, let's keep going towards that longer term goal. If you happen to be coming into this from, say, you work in the restaurant business, you work in the entertainment business, whether you do PR for the hospitality, sector, or all your clients were in restaurants, there's a good chance that there's nothing going to be opening in the near term. And so perhaps you're looking to pivot a bit. One thing I will say, and I think is really important to understand, is that if you do need to pivot, if you need to find a short-term job solution that doesn't necessarily fit in with your long-term career plans, don't freak out about that. I think everybody is going to have a bit of understanding, and it's okay if you have to go outside your regular industry or your regular field. If you have to take the side gig right now in order to make money and feel secure, it's okay if it's not the career path that you're ultimately trying to follow. It's okay to take a little curve. I think a lot of people are going to be taking some of those curves in their career paths over the next few months, and that's okay. So don't be worried about that. I'm going to adjust you a little bit. So there we go. Guys like my roots. I miss you. I miss you. The beauty industry. I miss you, Racine Salon. Just saying. Okay, so if you're just joining me, my name's Amanda Augustine. I'm the career expert for Top Resume, Top Interview, and Top CV. And really, all these organizations are trying to help people tell the best version of their story and land that job sooner rather than later. And today, I'm really talking about what are some strategies you can employ while you're trying to find work during this pandemic. And it's really affecting everyone, right? In some way, shape, or form. Either you're not working, you've been laid off, or you're working from home in this unusual environment, or with your children, which is a challenge all into itself. I think we could dedicate an entire talk about that one. If we get through this talk and my preschooler does not run in and jump on my back in the middle of this, I will consider this a very big success. And I know there are a lot of you out there that feel me on that one. So we're talking about once you've taken that deep breath and said, okay, this is the situation, I think it's really important to develop both a short-term and a long-term strategy for your job search. When it comes to the short-term, that's often for those where their industry isn't hiring at the moment because it's been so negatively affected by the coronavirus. There are companies still hiring, and I want to go into some of those resources you can use in order to find them. Some of those industries may have switched more to hiring remote workers. Some of them are still going to hire and you're just going to be working from home for the short term. There are also short-term opportunities, something that may be completely outside of your current industry or your current field, but it's a good solution for now to help you feel more secure, to help make sure that there's money coming in. So let's talk about a few different resources you can use to identify some of these opportunities. One, if you just do an online search for companies that are hiring now, or temporary jobs available during COVID or coronavirus, you will definitely come up with a lot of news stories that will specifically point to, more often than not, those big brands, those chain organizations that are supplying, that are hiring a lot of people at a rapid pace because it's a sector where there's actually a need for their service, a greater need for their service during this time. Think your supermarket chains, think online on-demand services, anything like that, that's suddenly in demand. If you're sitting at your home, what are you suddenly consuming more of? What are you tuning into? Think about those things. What are your behaviors? Because that can also help you brainstorm, well, what makes sense and what am I also interested in? In terms of finding jobs that are remote, something you can do from the comfort of your home, assuming that you have a strong internet connection, a working computer, a good phone line, those sorts of things. I found this amazing resource by a guy named Ryan Robinson, and we'll definitely share that link out. It's in a larger article that Top Resume recently published, but he provides 60 of the best remote job sites out there. So it runs the gamut. He does it by specialty. I think it's a really amazing source. If you're seeing jobs being posted, in the last week or so, you know that there are still actively hiring. Take advantage of those. Again, the guy's name is Ryan Robinson. And if you Google his name and say Ryan Robinson, 60 best remote job sites, you will find this really comprehensive article. I'll put it out there. I have no affiliation with this person. I've never spoken to him. I found this resource and I've been handing it out to a lot of friends and family recently, so I wanted to share it with all of you as well. There are some other resources that my colleague came across, and she did an amazing job because some of these I had not heard of, and it was so great to have all these new resources that I could offer up to all of you as well. There is a site, it's called stillhiring.io, stillhiring.io. It's a platform that's created exclusively by crowd-based data. So keep that in mind that it's crowdsourced. And basically people are chiming in and saying, this company's hiring, this employer is hiring. And so it's a really great place where people are, offering up these insights. Either they work there or they heard about it. So definitely keep that in mind. It's a great resource. It's a different resource, and it's brand new. It's up really, if you check out the homepage, they're all about trying to help with what's going on right now. So check out Ryan Robinson's blog post on the 60 best remote job sites. And Ryan is spelled R-Y-A-N. Robinson is R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. There's a cool new app called Upstream, and I believe Medium may have come up with it, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong. They're calling it the hiring and helping community. It's really people looking for ways to help one another, and so it's yet again it has more of a community networking feel to it, but it's people chiming in saying this person's hiring for that, my company's doing this. So it has a really nice, community kind of thing going on. Definitely worth checking out. Again, I would never just use one resource when you're looking for a job. You want to find as many resources out there and really assess what opportunities are available, and which ones make sense based on your skill set, your experience, the strengths that you bring to the table. It's okay if you're going outside your usual career path to find an opportunity that works for now. You got to do what you got to do. But I also recommend checking out these sites because some of these are full-time opportunities. Some of these are opportunities that would fit into your long-term plans. I'm going to go through some more resources here on where you can find either short-term work or, solely telecommuting work and those sorts of things. But don't discount the usual job sites and apps that you would use when you're searching for a job. Please, please, please don't forget to continue networking. And it doesn't mean obviously going to events. That's not what we're talking about. That doesn't make sense in today's time. But it does mean calling up people that are in your industry or the industry that you're interested in pursuing at this point. It does mean reaching out to your friends and family who may or may not have connections into a company or a type of field that you're looking for work in and saying, have you heard anything? Do you know what's going on? I think because things are so uncertain and a little crazy at the moment, or a lot, that it might be useful just to find out and say, hey, is your company hiring right now? Because they may have not published it. Maybe they're trying to minimize the number of candidates they're dealing with at the moment because they're also trying to figure this out. We're trying to figure out how to either work from home for the first time or exclusively in a different environment where maybe your family members are around that you're not used to if you were used to working from home, or perhaps now you're searching for work. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of that, but you have to remember companies that are still doors open, virtual doors open, still functioning, still working, they're also trying to figure this out. The hiring process is going to be a little different because most companies are not used to interviewing exclusively through video or over the phone. They're used to walking people around the office. They're used to getting those face-to-face meetings. And now they have to change their process, not just the hiring process, but even the onboarding process when they do decide to extend a job offer. So assume that there's going to be some hiccups along the way. Don't assume the worst if it takes them a while to get back. I think both employers and job seekers should be giving one another the benefit of the doubt because it's a little different. I got a great, so Stephen, do you feel during these uncertain times, it's a good opportunity to reach out for new opportunities, or it's a good time to reach out for new opportunities? Stephen, if you're currently employed, I 100% say, yeah, still look. You should still always be on the lookout for jobs, for new opportunities. So 100% continue that exploratory process. I think for those who are employed right now, especially, this is a really great time to take stock and say, okay, do I really like what I'm doing? Do I really enjoy the company I'm working for? I've heard more than one person tell me that the way that their company responded to COVID and how they implemented or did not implement as quickly a work from home policy, just how they handled this whole thing has made them question whether they want to stay with that company. A friend of mine works for a startup, and it's a well-known startup, but I'll keep the name to myself just in case he doesn't want it broadcast to the world. But he told me, hey, this is how my company responded. And it was very much like, hey, your health is most important. I care about, we care about you. We care about your families. Stay home. If you can work, great. If you can't work, please let us know. We understand. It's crazy. Everyone has to homeschool now, all that kind of fun stuff. I mean, such a very positive and understanding response. And then his spouse works for a very different type of company. And their communication was, great news. We've now done something with our system so you can work remotely the entire time with no time off. And I mean, she had to negotiate not to work all of her hours during normal business hours because she had to swap on and off with her husband. And it was just left such a bad taste in her mouth. And I totally get that. And so I think a lot of people are, going to come out of this crisis period and say, is this really what I want to do? Is this who I want to work for? Maybe it is time for a change. If you're feeling that now, or if you were kind of feeling things out and looking for a new opportunity before all this came down, I wouldn't abandon your job search efforts. I wouldn't abandon that plan. I would keep in mind that depending on the type of role you're interested in, the industry that you were targeting, you may have to pause, or you may have to be understanding that the opportunities just might not be available today. And that's okay. So for some people, I think their job search will be delayed in terms of getting that job right away. But at the same time, that shouldn't mean that you shouldn't continue talking to your network, identifying where there might be opportunities, if not today, in the future. Working on all your personal branding materials. This is a really great time to sit down and reevaluate your resume, to update it based on where your goals are headed. Always remember your resume, your LinkedIn profile, even how you prioritize who you want to talk to in your network, all comes down to what are your job goals, because that is the foundation of a strong search. That's why even if you're looking for a short-term job opportunity right now, inventory your skills. Identify, okay, well, what are those short-term jobs that I want to pursue. And then look at how you may need to now tweak or reposition your resume, your LinkedIn profile, so that you're speaking to the requirements of that role, especially if this is taking, a hard left turn away from your career path up to date. Does that make sense, Stephen? Things are definitely uncertain. Would I recommend saying, see it to your boss and handing in your resignation if you don't have something lined up? No, I'd be really, really careful about something like that. You're always in the best position to find a job when you're currently employed. So I always recommend trying to stick it out unless your job is harming you in some way, shape, or form, and making you sick in some way, shape, or form. Readjust. Okay. You're also always considered more attractive and more, to employers when you currently have a job. So yes, if you can hold on to it, by all means do so before, giving it up to search for a job full time. If you found that job and you're really excited about it, do your research into the stability of that company. Definitely if you get to the interview process and you're past those initial rounds, you do want to kind of dig deeper into, what's their plan? Are they concerned about how the economy and the pandemic may be affecting their business? Ask the hard questions, because obviously you don't want to be last in and first out at a company. But if you're currently unemployed right now and you're looking for a job, do your research and identify, are there opportunities that fit into your long-term plans that are available today? Great, that's the job search you should be running. But if you're well aware that you were laid off and you still want to remain in your industry and your industry is not hiring right now, look for those short-term opportunities. So I already talked about a few of them. One, of course, look for opportunities where it's 100% remote, where you can telecommute. There's a great link on a site by Ryan Robinson on the 60 best remote job sites. Definitely hit up that. There's a cool platform called stillhiring.io. That's all crowdsourced data that showcases employers who are actively hiring at the moment. There's an app called Upstream, and I think that one's really cool because it's more of a community that's helping each other get hired. So in this time when we don't get to see our friends face to face and everything is virtual, any opportunity to engage with another person, any opportunity to create those connections, I think it's great. Abdul is saying, no one reads 3-page resumes. I've always thought of having a 1-pager to circulate to unsolicited contacts. I gotta pop down to spark the conversation. It's interesting you say that, Abdul. There was actually a really cool study done, I think in the last year, I think it was 2019, by an organization called Resume Go. And they had, I can't remember how many recruiters were involved in the process, but I know they looked at thousands of resumes, and they actually found that a 2-page resume is the ideal length regardless of years of experience, which I thought was really interesting, because if you were newer to the workforce, I was always pushing for more of a 1-pager. And what I really gathered from that study, when you really actually read the whole white paper and get into it and that sort of thing, if you have enough information that warrants a 2nd page, you should go to it. You shouldn't force it, though. You're not sitting there putting everything in Courier New, double-spaced, huge margins to make it go to 2 pages. The same thing about 3-page to 2-page. I do recommend a 2-page resume over 3 pages unless there's some extenuating circumstance. There's always going to be unique cases, right? But ideally, you want it down to 2. I don't think you need to get it to 1 page. Frankly, the study said that that's not what they're looking for, because frankly, even in that quick glance, it's less than 10 seconds the average recruiter spends looking at that resume. I think the top third of your resume needs to set the stage for everything else. That's what needs to whet their appetite. You need to have your name, your contact information, that professional title, that short professional summary that really is the elevator pitch for the rest of your document. You need to have some sort of incorporation of your strengths and skills, so they have a sense of, at a high level, what you're about. And you definitely need the most recent opportunity coming up on that first page. I think people are trending more towards 2 pages versus 1, because employers, I mean, Top Resume did a study, about a year ago, where we were looking at, self-written DIY resumes versus professional written, and asked all these different questions of recruiters to try and understand, well, which do you like better, and more importantly, why? What's the difference? Because the professionally written resumes were considered more polished. It meant that the people had that they seemed they were more confident in presenting these candidates to their hiring manager. I'm trying to think of some of the other things off the top of my head. The big one is we asked, well, what do you think this person's worth in the job market? And the professionally written resumes were valued about 7% higher than the self-written. So obviously there's a lot of, great things that can come out of working with a professional resume writer. But when I'm talking about, what were some of those differences? Anyone can make sure that their resume is typo-free, grammatically correct, that sort of thing, right? Those little silly mistakes, that isn't the big difference between a self-written and a professionally written. What we found out was it's 3 things. 1, it presents a compelling career narrative. In other words, your resume tells a story. It's not just here's all my experience and here's how great I am, but how do you kind of weave a story that shows I did this and that's why I'm now qualified and a good candidate for this type of role. That was a big one, being able to quantify or demonstrate the value that you provide to an organization. So providing context. You didn't just do X, Y, and Z, but what was some of the output? How did you help things run better, smoother, more efficiently? How did you make them more money? What did you do that benefited the organization? That was a big one. And I get for some roles that doesn't make sense. You can't necessarily put those types of numbers, but it's more about how do you contribute? How did you help? How did you support that organization? If you missed a day of work, what wouldn't get done because you weren't there? If you weren't there, what balls would get dropped in your department, on your shift, whatever it is? Those are the things that you highlight the most. Oh, thanks, Lewis. I'm so glad you had such a great experience with Top Resume. I'm seeing somebody else saying, oh, Wesley had a hard time knocking their resume back to 5. How do you articulate your experience from a 20-year career? Oh, Wesley, you're going to hate me when I tell you this, but it's because you only want to focus on the most recent 15 for sure. And the amount of detail you provide for each role continually decreases as you get further back in your career. Because the reality is that employers are like, great, I'm so glad you did that 10 years ago, but what have you done recently that's relevant to what I'm hiring for? For somebody who has a lot of experience, what I typically recommend is that in addition to having your professional summary and, some sort of collection of your areas of expertise, have a career highlights section that's maybe, 3 to 5 bullets that highlight some of the headliners from your 20-year career. Anything that is highly brag-worthy as well as very relevant to whatever you're pursuing today, so that if it does fall towards the end of page 2, you're making sure that it's getting a nod on that first page. But always look at each role and curate the information you're providing for each role you describe based on what your current goal is. Okay, swinging back down. Hi, Amber. My friend Amber's watching. Amber, I saw your picture from the other day of the thing you're doing as a live event. And let me tell you, Josh and I started doing it. Josh is my 4-year-old, everyone. So very cool. Thank you. I need some Mod Podge or something like that, but, but you did inspire me to plan some things. All right. If you know me, I can get off topic. So let's bring it back around. If you just joined me, my name's Amanda Augustine, and I'm the career expert for Top Resume, as well as our sister brands, Top Interview and Top CV. And we're talking all about job hunting today in this crazy, crazy time. Whether you were laid off as a result of COVID or you were already actively hunting for a job, and now it's gotten a bit more complicated, shall we say. And that's putting it lightly. I went over a few resources resources already of different things that you can use in order to identify who's still hiring. Of course, I'm always going to say also look for those short-term opportunities, something that may be remote or telecommuting. It can be a part-time role. It can be a short-term role. A couple other things I wanted to bring up. There's this VC firm out there called Torch Capital, Torch Capital, Capital. I feel like it's a spelling exam today. They created a spreadsheet that anybody can access. So if you actually Google their name, or there is I believe Top Resume shared it in this thread, and I'll share it on my pages as well after this. They created a spreadsheet of all the opportunities that are available and additional resources. I think it's really cool. Everyone's adding to it. There is a website called moderndayjobs.com. This is interesting because this is a little, I'd say, unorthodox in the sense that it's not just, oh, here are the telecommuting jobs and here are these opportunities, but this group curated a list of over 100 different ways you can make money off the internet that involve both part-time and full-time jobs. That's moderndayjobs.com. I think that's a really cool one because it's some of those crazy kind of weird side gigs that you can do, especially if you're trying not to go far off your career path and you want to still, stay there. We already talked about how it's okay to take a breath after you've been let go. Give yourself a moment to grieve. I don't care what is going on in the world. Hey, I'm seeing Bob. Okay, Bob Tigro. Okay, I'm going to make sure that somebody reaches out to help you with that and see about the emails. I'm sorry. I'm not dealing with the emails from our teams, at Top Resume, but I will make sure that they reach out to you. Wesley's asking about, how do you articulate additional duties on a resume? And so I guess my question is, what do you mean by additional duties? Keep in mind that a resume is actually not just a record. It's not like a transcript from school where it's going to give every single detail of everything that's going on in every job you've ever held. Your resume is a marketing document. Think of it that way. It's not a transcript. It's more of a marketing document. You get to curate the content that you provide. That doesn't mean lying, but that means determining what details do you want to share and what details are you going to either downplay or omit entirely because they don't make sense. And I say don't make sense in meaning that they're not relevant based on the type of opportunity that you're going after today. So in your role, you may have had many responsibilities. You're really only going to focus on summarizing the responsibilities that are relevant to the type of role you want to pursue today. You don't have to list everything you've done. And my preferred style, and again, every resume writer is different, and we have these soft guidelines, but they get changed and tweaked based on what do we have to work with, because that's something to keep in mind, is that you can only work with the information we have. We can't make up other stuff. And for some people, you need to kind of bend those rules to give them the best possible document. But in an ideal world, assuming you're not fresh out of school entry level, because you're not going to have that type of information to work with, I like to provide the job title, the company name, perhaps a line about the company to give the reader context, especially if many of the employers on your resume are not self-explanatory. They're not well-known national brand names that everyone would recognize. And then the job title, how long have you worked there, start date to end date. You can decide whether you're just going to show the year, if you're going to show the month and year for both of those. You just have to keep it consistent. And then ideally, I like to have a short paragraph, maybe 3 or so lines, 3 or 5, that describe what were my roles and responsibilities, keeping in mind what I want to do now. If there's stuff that doesn't make sense because it's not relevant, then I'm not going to include that. I'm going to focus on what did I do in this most recent job that's most relevant to what I want to do now. And then I save my bullet points for the bragging points. I've always said bullet points equal bragging points. How did you help the company? How did you contribute? How can you show that we always say, an achiever versus a doer. And I get people say, well, I had a doer job. Ignore those words. Those are labels. It's more about how do you show that you were good at what you did or at what you do. So it could be that you were given the best shifts, that you were asked to train the new hires, that you were asked to shadow, let the new hires shadow you. Obviously, anything like that where either you took on more responsibility, you were asked to help recruit, hire, train anybody new. If you were promoted, if you were, given anything like that, your title changed, you were given a larger budget to work with. Those are all things that show, hey, I was pretty good at my job. So yeah, here are my roles and responsibility. And here's proof that I didn't just do it, I did it well. That's what you're trying to pull out, because that's what recruiters are trying to figure out. How can I figure out if this person was good at what they did before they decided to change, or they ended up leaving the organization? For other people, it can be easier if you're in sales. It's showing, did you meet quota or beat quota? Did you get the President's Award, or did you win the big trip to Hawaii with your family because you were one of the top salespeople? Those are obviously easy bragging points that you would put into your bullet points. If you think of other things, if you helped cut costs, make things run more efficiently, if you brought in your project on time, under budget or on budget, within budget, those sorts of things, those are all those bragging points that we're looking for. So those are ways, when you're saying how to articulate additional duties. If you need to add certain jobs into your work history that may not be as relevant, but obviously I do like to try and keep you, I don't like to present holes in someone's employment history. So if a job you had wasn't relevant, but it took up a chunk of time in your timeline, you still want to mention it, of course. So you're not omitting it entirely, but you're not going to give it a lot of space on your resume. You're going to make it a much smaller than, say, the much more relevant job that was above or below it on your resume, if that makes sense. All right, I'm swinging back around. Looking at what else do we have here? Okay, Abdul is asking to mention some of those resources again. Sure, there is an article. If you go to topresume.com and click on career advice, I'm hoping Top Resume will let me know. will let me know what the name of that article is, because I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I know it's up in the Amanda's Picks section right now if you're on the main Top Resume career advice section. I think it's, how to find a job now, or where can you find a job now, resources for finding a job during coronavirus, something like that. All right, Abby is asking recommendations to network with people during this time of isolation. Love it. Yeah, so hard. So how in the world do you network when you're all at home? I think this is great because it's actually going to force people to get a little bit more creative with networking. I hate it when someone says, oh yeah, I networked. I sent out 15 LinkedIn requests today. Sending a LinkedIn connection request, it might be the start of networking, but it's not networking, because it's the same thing as if you were walking around a bar and throwing your business cards at people, or you were trying to find a date that way, right? It's a little different. So I think there are some really cool opportunities. One site I would check out, it's called 10times.com. 10times.com. So 10 Times is a site that's dedicated to conferences, trade shows, any type of meeting that's getting together. It allows you to slice and dice by industry, by sector, by location, all that stuff. In truth, I didn't check it out before this, but I bet they have a section that's dedicated to virtual events right now. So if you're looking for something that's more structured than your average, chatting with people on the phone, I check that out for sure. There are some places that are doing virtual job fairs. If you Google virtual job fairs, for blank industry. Again, assuming your industry isn't one that's basically shut down at the moment. I don't think you're going to see a lot of job fairs for those in the restaurant industry right now, or hospitality, or things of that nature. Other ways that you can network. I really like to use this opportunity to identify the social butterflies, or as Malcolm, what's his last name? The guy who did The Tipping Point. Do you guys know who I'm talking about? The author who did the book, The Tipping Point. It's Malcolm something or something Malcolm. Cannot think of it for the life of me right now. I call it social butterflies. He calls it power connectors. So his sounds a lot more official. But I like to identify, when I'm thinking about my friends, who's the person who introduces you to a ton of people? There's a way an exercise you can go through, make a list of, say, 25 people that aren't family members, that you didn't meet directly at work, someone that you met through someone else. Make a list of those. And then in the next column over, write the name of the person who introduced you to that person. How did you meet the other person in the first place? So that's your column A is your initial list. Column B is who introduced you to that person in column A. Then you're going to do one in column C, and you're going to say, well, who introduced you to the other person? So let's start with, Bobby Sue introduced me to Eddie, and Eddie introduced me, and I met Eddie, that didn't work. How did I meet Bobby Sue? Well, Eddie introduced me to Bobby Sue. Well, how'd I meet Eddie? Well, Lauren introduced me to Eddie. Well, how'd I meet Lauren? Well, Frank introduced me to Lauren. You want to go through that series about 4 times, and you want to do it for all 25 people. And yes, thank you, Michael Gladwell, Malcolm Gladwell. Oh, I feel so much better. You're trying to identify who is connecting you to so many different people. Who are your natural power connectors who not only seem to have these really vast and super eclectic groups of friends, but they actually enjoy introducing people to one another. I'm one of those people. I love when someone says, oh, I'm kind of thinking of this. I'm like, oh, you need to talk to my friend Amy. You need to talk to Louise. How can I find a way where I can connect people? I think it's so interesting. And identify those people. They're the ones that you want to get on the phone. I mean, shoot them an email, shoot them a text, whatever's the easiest way to get in touch with them. But those are the people I'd reach out to. Even if they have nothing to do with the type of role you're pursuing, they're the people who probably know someone who can introduce you to someone who would be useful. I'd say, you know what, I'm just thinking about this, or I'm looking for these types of opportunities right now. I know you have this huge network. I was curious if there was anybody, any of your friends, colleagues, friends of friends that you could introduce me to. I'm not expecting them to have a job for me today, but I want to talk to them a little bit more about what's going on, or do they know, what's going on in their industry. So I think that's a way to do it. I think a lot of networking is going to be one-on-one. We're really going to have to connect with one another again. We're going to have to offer up, hey, you want to jump on a phone call? Want to FaceTime? Google Hangout? Zoom? I think it's hilarious how many people I've seen on my feeds recently who said, I'd never heard of Zoom before, and now I'm having 7 Zoom meetings a day. Everyone's getting into the technology. Use it for your job search too. Look for those opportunities to have this type of conversation, this face-to-face, as opposed to just online, just via email, just via text, even over the phone, because it gives you an opportunity to make a connection. Some people are crazy busy right now. Some people are bored out of their minds sitting at home. Frankly, I would love to be bored out of my mind just for a couple days. But that's not the cards that we've been dealt. And you know what? I should feel blessed by that. But there are some people who are, I'm seeing on social media all the time saying how bored they are. Well, if any of those people can help you, man, get them on the phone. They are craving some interaction. Give them a purpose. Let them help identify opportunities and people to talk to. I'm hearing something. Okay, let me get back to some of these questions. For anyone who's still here or has just joined us, my name is Amanda Augustine, and I'm the career expert for Top Resume, as well as our sister sites, Top Interview and Top CV. And we're talking all about job seeking during this crazy, crazy time. Employers mostly have a budgeted figure in mind for a specific position. Conventional wisdom, requires us not to throw the number first, but let the employer say it. But employers usually do insist on on a number. It's so interesting because there is a guy named Jack Chapman. And he wrote this book that I've always considered to be the Bible of salary negotiation. It's How to Make $1,000 a Minute. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it electronically. And, you know, he was always of the recommendation of, yeah, wait until they give you a number, try and dodge and deflect those questions. Ultimately, if they make you answer, of course you have to answer, because otherwise you're not going to move forward. But I saw in a recent update on his book that he's actually now recommending to throw out that number. And maybe it's just because I didn't read deeply into it. So I'd say, hey, definitely check it out. It's a great resource. I really like it because he has a lightning round section at the very beginning of the book. So if you only have a certain amount of time, you can read those quickly and, you know, prep for that phone call or that video interview in, you know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But he also provides talk tracks, sample things you can say and do, and how the conversation may play out, which I always found to be incredibly helpful. So if you are asked that number and you've tried to kind of work around it, and you're like, oh, I'd like to learn more about the job before I put a number out there so I better understand what the responsibilities are, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, you give me a number, or I don't want to move forward, or we're not going to move forward with you. My recommendation is do your research ahead of time. Always make sure you've done your research before you jump on even, you know, that initial phone screen, because oftentimes they are asking for a number. You can use PayScale. You can use salary.com. You can use Glassdoor. There's another one called Paysa, Paysa. There are plenty of other resources out there. Those have just been my go-to. I personally find salary.com to be the most useful, but there's so many new ones coming out. So, hey, definitely check out all the resources available and get an understanding of what does that range look like for the current job market, given the industry, the location, the size of the company, as well as how many years of relevant experience you have, and do you meet the educational requirements for the role. Once you've seen what that range is, I always pick a number that's on the lower end, but not the bare minimum, just on the lower end, and say, well, based on my research, it seems that, you know, the going rate for this type of role right now begins around X number. However, of course, I'm flexible and I'd like to learn more about the role before giving, you know, a firm number, but I'm expecting something like that or around that level. I don't go for the top number. You can try the middle. You can try a little lower than the middle. But keep in mind, when it's that initial conversation, you're just trying to not get removed from the interview process already. Because as you start interviewing, as you start learning more about the opportunity, as you start proving to them all the value you could bring to the table, they'll get out of that budget mind and they'll be more into that, ooh, this person could do a lot for us. And there tends to be a little bit more wiggle room as you progress in the interview process, because they like you, because you've made it through those other rounds, because they've gotten rid of other people. And then when it really comes down to getting a job offer, you never have to accept the first number they throw out at you. You can always just pause, repeat it, say you'd like to give it some thought, or say, hey, you know, now that I know more about the opportunity, I think I'm looking for something closer to this number, or I want this number. Can we get any closer? Is there any room for negotiation here? And that's normally how I go about that type of conversation. Okay. Can you give me some sense of what's the best way to capture the attention of an employer, especially now when there's a tremendous talent surplus on the back of this epidemic? 100%. I agree. For those who are already looking and now the job market's inundated with more applicants, 100%. One, your resume has to be spot on. You know, my CEO, Jeff Berger, often says, and I completely agree, that resume writing is both an art and a science. You're writing a resume with at least two, if not more, audiences in mind. But two of those audiences are that electronic gatekeeper, the applicant tracking system. It's a piece of software that scans resumes when they're submitted online, parses the information, and then tries to designate a value to your your candidacy. Basically saying, it's not as good as we'd like it to be in terms of cherry picking the best candidates. It's actually better at eliminating what it deems to be the least qualified candidates. Excuse me. I'm gonna have to grab a sip of water, guys. So something to keep in mind is that you could be very qualified, but if your resume isn't engineered with these robots in mind, you could still be eliminated from the search. And we have a lot of great content on this. I've written a few articles on this that goes into the nitty gritty about how do you write a resume to beat the bots. It has to do with what file format you use, optimizing it with keywords, avoiding unusual fonts, that sort of thing. So that's one thing. The initial review by a human being, you typically get less than 10 seconds to, capture their attention. And to your point, there's a lot of other people vying for that same attention. I think it really comes down to telling a strong career narrative and making your resume as easy as possible to skim and identify why are you qualified for this opportunity. Always go back to that job description. What are the requirements? What's desired and what is an absolute must-have? What do they care about? Based on what they're saying as the requirements, as well as what are the duties and responsibilities that the person who gets this job will take on. You want to look at every single line for line of that and say, have I done that? Have I done that? Do I have that skill? Where is that clearly demonstrated on my resume? At what point in my career, in my timeline, have I done those things? Have I made that obvious? And what I like to do often is give a copy of the job description and a copy of my resume to a friend, someone who's not even in my industry, and say, hey, look at these. Do you think I meet these? Yes or no? Or forget the job description altogether, just the resume. What do you think I'm looking for in my job? What do you think I'm searching for? What type of role? And why do you think I'm qualified for that? And it's a quick thing. You give them 15 seconds, 30 seconds max. If they can't automatically pull that information out, if it's not clear to them, then you need to refine the resume further. And I think that's important to keep in mind because your resume is always written with a job goal in mind. Even if it's a short-term job goal, you're going to have to tweak that sucker a bit for the short-term opportunities that you're looking for. And then you're probably going to have to, recraft the sucker after this pandemic's over and the job market calms down and comes back and you go back to your regular career path. All right, I am looking for what other questions have I missed that I'm supposed to be answering at the moment. Oh, in terms of how else can you stand out? Sorry, I didn't really completely answer your question. So yes, obviously you want to make sure your resume is clearly written so that it's going to get past that 10-second test. And really, it's not about fancy fonts. It's not about pictures. It really isn't in terms of that, like for standing out, especially if it's going to have to go through that online software, that hiring software. It's more about how can you make it simple and easy to read and easy to understand at a quick glance. How can you make your qualifications just obvious to who's ever reading it? The other thing is networking. And I know everyone's like, oh, networking. No, networking is really, really important. There's been multiple studies that have shown that you're 10 times more likely to land the job. I don't mean just get an interview, but land the job when your application is accompanied by some sort of employee referral. And what that really means is that you're talking to people in your network and that maybe you're bypassing that whole application process. Or maybe you had to still formally do it, but you're going to then pass your application on to a friend of a friend who's passing it to the hiring manager. So it's in front of them and it's going to, you're guaranteed it's not getting lost in the black hole. And better yet, someone's advocating on your behalf. It's rare that if somebody wants to work for my organization, they hand me a resume. If I don't think they're a good fit, frankly, I'll say, hey, I promised somebody that I was going to pass this along, but it's not a great fit. Nobody does that. They'll be like, oh, I don't know if this is the right fit for you. So when someone actually passes along a friend, a relative, a friend of a friend, if they're passing on the application, it's their reputation that's on the line. They're not going to recommend someone if they don't think they'd be a good fit. They might not know the technicalities of that person's skill set, but it's rare if they think someone's not going to be a good cultural fit, they're never going to pass them along. And so those employee referrals, those referrals in general carry a lot of weight. I recently had a fantastic phone screen with a recruiter. This is coming from Michael. Oh, this is long. Okay. She said, I'm more than impressed. Sent me an email a few days later. They suggested times 2 weeks away. I choose the soonest slot to interview. A minute before my scheduled interview, they sent an email saying the position has been filled. I'm sorry, it's not going to be articulate. That sucks. I'm sorry. That really sucks, Michael. So basically, he moved on to the next round. They gave him all signs indicating that he kicked butt in that interview, took the first available one, and then a minute before the scheduled interview sent an email saying that, well, I think that's an awful experience, awful experience. And I'm so sorry for that. What I would recommend, and I know it's challenging, but in order to keep yourself in that mindset and keep going, one thing I recommend is that you always have to pursue multiple jobs simultaneously. The moment you get scheduled for a phone screen, you go out and try and identify new opportunities to pursue. And I say that because if you start putting all your eggs into one basket and it doesn't pan out and you kind of stopped the networking activities, you stopped looking for new jobs to apply for, if you halt all that activity, and the one that you really thought was going to work out doesn't happen, it is devastating, and it is hard to get back on that saddle and start job seeking again, especially if you've lost all that momentum because you weren't doing anything and now you're starting from the starting point again. Obviously, if that's happened, this is okay, Amanda. I totally get it. But one thing I'd get in the mindset is that always be searching for new opportunities, even if you think you have it in the bag. Even if you think you're down to negotiating the salary, continue to look for new opportunities. One, it will protect you so that if that opportunity falls through, you are not back at zero, that you still have some eggs in that basket. Even better, you might have two that you have to actually decide between. Oh, awesome problem to have. But also, when you're trying to concentrate on multiple opportunities, you can't dwell on one and get too fixated on it. Obviously, you want to prepare. Obviously, you still always want to do whatever you can to nail that job. But I think, especially right now, I think we're going to see a lot of people where they said they were actively interviewing and everything went well, and now it's kind of gone either radio silent or really little communication since everything's gone down. Pursue other opportunities. Don't assume that's going to pan out. Of course, it's hope for the best, but assume the worst and keep operating as under the worst and look for other opportunities. If that one comes back, great, but it's not the one that you're, really stuck on. Ooh, question from Diane. What about being out of the job market due to a move or taking care of young kids? Oh, and I think we're going to see a lot of that now. I mean, if I was looking for a job before this went down and now my children are all at home and, I need to take care of them and there's no one else who's, in my home who can watch them. Yeah, that's going to be incredibly challenging. I can't imagine I would love to know if anybody is starting a brand new job and they're in this weird telecommuting situation and they have all their children at home that need their attention. So a couple things. If you've been out of the job market due to a move or taking care of young kids, this is something that you can help articulate in your cover letter. I wouldn't dwell on the kids, but I mean, the fact that you've been out of the job market because you were moving, that's an easy one. Whether it's my spouse moved or I had to move to be closer to family or whatever it is, you can make it clear that, I address it. I just say address it, put it in the thing, in your cover letter. Put it when you're talking to people looking for those opportunities. I don't know how big of a gap we're talking about here, but you're always looking for ways, regardless of the reason for why there's a gap on your resume. You always want to talk about, well, how can you demonstrate that you were keeping a pulse on the job market? Were you doing anything to, keep your skill set sharp? Those sorts of things. That's typically what we're looking for is, okay, well, did you take an online course? And okay, maybe you didn't for the last 4 months, but you could pop one in now that you listen to. If you can get it in there, it always helps, because you want to show, well, people are concerned about hiring someone who's been out of work for a while, whether it's fair or not. I'm not judging here. I know there are a lot of very strong opinions one way or another. I'm just trying to explain what some of employers or recruiters' reservations are about. They're concerned that if it's been a while, well, how do we know that you still have kept up with what's going on? Technology is constantly changing, best practices are constantly changing, industries are changing. How do we know that you're still going to know what's going on? How can you demonstrate to us that you've kept up with things, or that you're making efforts now to be on top of things? We talk about volunteering, right? One of my favorite things to do or recommend for those who've been out of work for a while, if you're looking to kind of fill that void, and it can be a networking opportunity, it can lead you down a different career path, it can open doors to new opportunities, but look for something called a skill-based volunteer opportunity. Let me see if I can remember some of those sources off the top of my head. There's one called Volunteer Match. There's one called Catch a Fire, CATCHAFIRE. These are nonprofit organizations who are looking for help in particular areas, and so it allows you to leverage your professional skills in a pro bono way, but it's something that you can actually add to your resume. I do want to get back, because I don't think I addressed it enough when Michael was talking about obviously feeling devastated about missing out on this job opportunity. Of course, I went down clear strategy. Okay, going forward, let's make sure there's lots of balls in the air, so that it will prevent that feeling, or at least lower that feeling a bit. At the same time, it's hard. I think, one, you have to mourn it. You have to give it that time. You have to accept how you feel about it. You have to brush it off your shoulders and take a deep breath and remember that it's business, it's not personal, and it is of no reflection of you or the value that you have. You know what? It's not the right opportunity for you. That's the best way to look at it. It's not the right opportunity for you. And that's okay, because there are other opportunities out there. And don't let that one experience cause you to doubt the skills and the value that you're going to bring to another employer. Use it as a learning experience. Think about, well, what did they like about me? What did I emphasize? What worked for me? It could be that somebody else just popped out of nowhere. It could be that they got it, you don't know the circumstance, so there's no point in dwelling on it, but don't assume it's all about you. It could be something completely outside your control. It probably was something outside your control. And so don't let it haunt you. I know it's hard, but you got to take a deep breath and brush it off and say, okay, so what am I going to pursue now? I think we're just about out of time, everyone. Top resume, are there any major questions I missed that I should be still answering? Diane, again, I would say it's not crazy. Don't get too concerned about, being out of the job market due to a move. For taking care of young kids, I mean, we're talking about, it's really going to depend on how big of a break we're talking about. I think everyone, though, is going to get a little bit of a pass during this time period, because I think everyone understands that things are a little nuts and it's a difficult time. So at the end of the day, one thing I just remind everybody is, remember, it's okay to take a couple days or so and take a deep breath. If you haven't, please check to see if you can file for unemployment benefits. It's not, that's not admitting defeat. There's nothing wrong with that. You're owed it. If you were laid off during this time, you're owed that. So get online and find out if you qualify and file for it. Any little thing that's going to help you get through this, it's a short-term solution while you're finding and short-term, job opportunity. But ultimately, we're going to get back on path. So I wish everybody the best of luck. I'm going to go through this and see if I missed any major questions, and I will see if I can answer them even in just the comments later with additional detail. But thank you so much for chiming in. Thank you for all of your great questions. And if there's a different topic you'd love me to address in one of these in the coming week, please let me know. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care, everyone.